Hello, and welcome to the Northern Iron podcast. In this Good Friday Agreement special episode, I have Matthew from Progressive Politics NI to reflect on the effectiveness of the Good Friday Agreement. I also have Joe Hutchinson, the Alliance candidate for Ban Back, along with Matthew Haycock, an Ulster University student, where we will later have an open discussion on what has been said by the other Matthew, who I will call Matt. Matt, as I mentioned before, is from Progressive Politics NI, a cross-community political group which aims to encourage and promote progressive politicians. With the anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement, how effective do you think it has been?
Thanks very much for having me on. It's really, I think it's going to be an enjoyable discussion. I think it's fair as the Good Friday Agreement was fantastic and much needed for its time. It delivered government in the first instance. It was needed. We were living in a conflict society and a need for resolution. There had been years of discussions, obviously between various parties and different sides. So it was absolutely it was groundbreaking in 1998. I just feel like we've moved on from then. It's delivered at a form of government that's at first it was good for inclusion, getting all sides to the table. And that should have been good, but unfortunately, there has been ways that it's failed in a way. The form of government it delivered, it's an easy way to crash. There's outstanding questions still 25 years on in terms of things like the border pool question. It was too vague. Maybe in the original agreement, the Irish language rights are still lagging behind. Paramilitaries are still around, albeit in a somewhat different form of what they were before. They're sort of more in drugs now and stuff like that. As week as we've seen. So it was really good. And it was necessary in the first instance. If I had a vote in 1998, and I was just a little too young at 15, but if I did have a vote, I would have voted for it. But I can see the pitfalls of what it had, and I think 25 years on, it's time for change with it.
What do you think should be changed?
So we have obviously mandatory coalition. I think we need to change government, so change the form of government, so it can't keep being crashed down. As you've seen over the last 25 years, it's been brought down several times, and not always for the best reasons. And even if you agree with the reason, it's maybe not a good idea just to crash the whole level of government. So I think we need voluntary coalition going forward, a bit more traditional politics here. I know we're late place known for traditional left-right standards sort of political government type thing. But I do think we need a move to voluntary coalition where there's a government, party in power and an opposition that holds their feet to the fire. Because we were in a conflict society, and I understand the need for mandatory coalition in the first instance, but now we're in a post-conflict society. So the level of government is now actually, I think, keeping us back, or the form of the government is keeping us back. Sort of encourages divisive politics, where before it was a way to bring us together. Now it keeps the divisiveness alive. There's other changes that you could that's just one thing, of course. There's other things that you could change, like abolishing and reforming the petition of concern. That's been misused many times throughout the years, not so much recently, but I think with the new Windsor deal, it's been talked about again, and I sort of hope that after the fight for marriage equality and things like that, we wouldn't have to see it again, but it's still rearing its ugly head. And then you've got things like the designations that the politicians have to use, MLAs have to use, and Stormont, they have to be unionist or nationalist or other, and that sort of gives an unfair weighting in certain votes to the unionists and nationalists, because others their votes not worth as much, because it's when there's cross community votes, and that sounds all great and all, but I think it's sort of pushing divisiveness now rather than a way to get past it. So I don't see the need in a post-conflict society. I'm saying that we've totally moved on. We definitely haven't. Obviously there's issues still to discuss, but I don't think it's really necessary at this point anymore to have those designations or the level of government that we entered 25 years ago. I think it's well past time for change.
With the need for change, how do you think the government should go about it?
Obviously, what needs to be done is because it's the British government that would have the ways to do it. So it needs to come from Westminster, unfortunately. I say unfortunately because I don't think for a lot of the time they have our best interest at heart. They don't even have an interest, never mind. In this, it's just a lack of interest, I think. With Westminster, with a lot. That's not everybody, of course, over there, but I think in general, we're sort of a problem child for them. They'd rather not think about us. But I think the best thing they could do is now the British government would have to change it. Obviously, the Good Friday Agreement's been changed lots of times over the years, whether it be the British government's input, whether it be our various parties, usually the UP or Sinn Féin in latter years. But it's not like the Good Friday Agreement's never been changed. It's not. Some people try and pretend it's this holy shrine that we can never touch, but it's been changed lots of times. The St. Andrews Agreement.
You're right with all the changes, in the new decade, new approach deal, and those are sort of seen to be sort of changes, but government still collapses. So is there anything you think politicians should do today, not just to correct the flaws you point out, but to create something that will be a long-term solution so that no more agreements will have to be made?
Well, a lot of them have to come out and support it. If you think the DUP used to be open to voluntary coalition, they've wheeled that belief back, obviously because then it could be used against their current position of keeping government out or keeping everyone out of government. So they need to come back to that position. Sinn Féin need to change their approach. They're very much for voluntary coalition. I think because I guess you could argue it keeps them in government. But of course they'll have the top seat if we ever go back, assuming there's not another election which changes a lot. You need all the other parties and party activists and everyone to get behind the idea. I know Alliance are sort of shouting loudest about it at the moment, and that's great to see. It's really needed. So we need it from the SDLP, the UUP, everyone else that's involved in politics to come together. I think it's a thing that we probably could agree on. We can never in politics in general. People can everyone can't agree, but especially here, it can be so divisive. But I think the one thing that you keep hearing from people, whether they're interested in politics or not, and they have even a small passing interest in politics or no interest in politics, the one thing they always say, at least from what I gathered, is that there's no point in it because it keeps being brought down. If we can change the conversation to be saying, well, can we not change that and make it so it doesn't it can't be brought down one party. So with that being said, I know there's some parties calling for it. We need more people doing it. I think we need to all come together. Progressive politics and is exploring avenues about how to express that keen public interest.
So what are the plans? What plans?
Well, no, I can't announce anything at the moment.
Oh, wow.
Unfortunately, I'm being a tease, but it's not everything is booked. But I'm hoping for a public show of support in terms of ending the one-party veto and reforming Stormont. So plans are afoot, and so keep an eye on the socials for that. And if anybody hears this and is really interested, I encourage them to get in touch and somehow get involved.
I know at the moment there's going to be a lot of scrutiny about the Good Friday Agreement, and you've mentioned the flaws. Everyone knows the flaws, but is there anything that anyone hasn't pointed out yet?
There's probably lots of things that, as I said, some of the things I don't hear lots of people talking about getting rid of the designations of as I said before. But in terms of other things we're doing, we're constantly engaging with the parties and party activists about trying to make them more transparent. In previous elections, we done questionnaires. They were sent to all political candidates. We're gearing up to do that again with this local council elections that are coming up.
And are you able to gauge the politicians' attitudes to politics or the Good Friday Agreement?
I think for the most part, it's pretty positive in terms of even the likes of the DUP who voted against it at the time try to, let's be careful with my wording, they probably don't use it for the best reasons, but they usually there's a general show of support for it. So as I said previously, people need to understand that it has been changed before and it can be changed again. So there's some people that say no, we can't change it, but it's very well looked upon, obviously, because it brought about kind of peace here. It drastically reduced violence in the region. Obviously not like to the point where there's nothing going on, but a big change in it. But when like from pre-98 to post-98.
And before I allow Matthew and Joe to join in, is there anything you would add if there was a new agreement to be made?
Oh God, like I could be here all day and telling you about all the things we could include. What could I include? I think like the likes of things that we should include in it are like a whole bunch of reforms on how like the executive is done. There's a lot of stuff that the executive does in terms of voting and discussing on important legislation that is deemed too important for the assembly. But not the transparency is a big issue. I think in terms of how the decisions are made, how they're voted on, breakdown of votes. I don't think that's ever released minutes of meetings. Sounds like boring stuff, but it's important stuff. In terms of changing the voter age and registration, we're a group that believes in automatic registration of people being a registered voter from the age of 16. I think we should engage a lot more with young people because it is going to be our politics is going to affect them the most going forward, and I think we have to engage more people. I think it's about including political education as well. I know when I went to school there was nothing included in politics in school really. I think it's improved a little bit, but even what I hear from people who are around that age, it's not great. So I think those sort of things, if they can be brought into an agreement, it'll be fantastic.
So, Joe and Matthew, what are your thoughts on what has been said?
Okay, if I go first, yeah.
Yeah.
No, I definitely agree with Matt that the Good Friday Agreement has brought us this far. It's brought peace to Northern Ireland, definitely. But I do think that now people are starting to realise it needs reform. That the institutions that have collapsed, and like if you look at Northern Ireland now, less than 10% of schools are integrated. You have segregated housing, which obviously this causes all your duplication of services and pressures on budgets and all. But yeah, I think it definitely needs reform. I would definitely agree with progressive politics and that. But it's definitely it's improved the situation that we were in. Obviously, I wasn't born when the Good Agreement was signed, and that was about 4 or 5 years before me. But no, I think my generation's very glad of the people that came before us that got it over the line. But I think now we need a new generation of people to kind of take over the next 25 years.
Have you any thoughts, Matthew?
Well, yeah, just to say, and I do also agree with Matt there that the Good Friday Agreement did solve all the problems that Northern Ireland did have. It brought everyone to the table, stopped everyone from wanting to blow each other up. It was a good agreement at the time. Now it's just antiquated, basically. It's born at a time when Northern Ireland saw itself as a two-community system, when it's not anymore. It's not a Protestant or Catholic, Unionist or nationalist one, at least not for my generation anyway. We see ourselves as Northern Irish. We are just a Northern Irish community, and it just feels like saying that only one side of a coin that doesn't exist to us should be in charge. It just seems very not our generation's thought process in the slightest, really.
So what do you think should be updated about the Good Friday Agreement? Would you agree that we should get rid of mandatory coalition like Matt has said, or what are your thoughts?
Yes, I think so. I think any time you see a coalition government, it always does the same thing. It just shows it doesn't work. It never can work. Two opposing ideologies will never want to stay together peacefully. They'll always try and get at each other's throat, play the annoying identity politics about the whole thing. It should be a removal of the mandatory coalition, as Matt said. It shows clearly over the times I voted anyway. I was, unlike Joe, I was around when it was signed in 98, and I saw the change. I saw the upliftedness, the whole situation. But at the same point, now I just see disillusionment now of the whole system. No one really cares or even believes in it, to be honest.
And anyone can answer this. Do you think that's a growing trend amongst younger people now that they just don't care about it?
Yeah, Yeah, it's always strange because I know when we go out and we knock doors, it always just come up with younger people, and so they don't bring up, the typical thing of a border poll or anything like that. It's bread and butter issues. But just to add to what Matthew said about being young people nowadays don't see themselves as Catholic or Protestant, whatever. I would 100% agree. We almost see ourselves as one community, one united community. And I think that's shown recently in recent election results of middle ground, progressive politicians winning more seats, younger people running for it. So I do think I would agree that that centre ground, that one united community, we're moving in that one direction.
And was there anything that Matt said that you would possibly disagree with, or anything you would like to add to what he was saying?
So far, we've agreed on almost everything. But no, the mandatory coalition, I would agree that it has to be reformed. It's like if I didn't turn up to my job, or if I, didn't like the people I worked with, I can't just decide, well, I'm just going to sit out for a year, 3 years, whatever. But it's the past number of years, 4 of them, by two sides of the political spectrum, both of them just haven't done the job they were elected to do. And with reform, it's for us. It's needed to stop that from happening and the institutions from collapsing again.
And Matt, would you like to say anything or add to anything what's been said?
I was just going to say, I know it's fantastic. We're all agreeing about maybe the change and reform that needs to happen at Stormont. But it's politics. Give us 5 minutes talking about issues, and we'll start splintering maybe a bit. It's going to happen, and that happens, and it happens in your friends, it happens in your family, it happens everywhere, and especially with people that are very politically charged. I sit in all kinds of groups, and it always happens. No matter how much you can align with someone, there'll always be differences, and that's just normal. That's just how people are. They're going to be in everything, and it'd be very boring if they did. But it's about improving, how we, come about and deal with those disagreements here. I think because of our conflict history, it's always been, maybe not even in moving into a post-conflict society. It's not been those disagreements haven't been addressed in good ways. But I think it's about a more grown-up conversation about how we not only not only about the issues, but how we solve the issues.
And anyone can answer this. Do you think all this government mess-ups and all the instability of the government, do you think this will disenfranchise people from politics altogether? Do you think it'll just make people shut off?
Yes. Sorry to jump in quickly. I fear it does. Now, don't get me wrong. My one of the reasons my group is set up is because I'm trying to do the opposite. I'm trying to get people more involved. But I do have a concern that people, this is just from my own reading of people when I chat to them about politics. Sometimes when I tell co-workers or friends and family I'm interested in politics, you can see the eye roll or the little giggle or whatever. I think there's a lot of disengagement with politics here, especially with the when government's out for so long. It has a really debilitating effect. So that's why I'm trying to help out in changing that, but I worry it does. But the other guys would know better, and because they're younger, they might know about how people are engaged, being in their circles,
No, what I would say is that my generation would probably be the most politically aware generation, but the least politically involved. Because it's you always get that cliche of politicians, old men, grey suits, that type of stuff. But it's always younger people are involved in politics, but that's only if they're involved from a young age. I was involved from the age of 14, but and like you said, the amount of eye roll I got, especially at that young age. But no, but young people are disenfranchised not just from politics, but I think politics puts them off this country. I think because the brain drain. Young people are moving to England, they're moving to Europe, everywhere else, because it's just that fact if there's nothing here for them, there's no opportunities, there's a lack of certainty if you can afford a house, raise a family, that type of stuff. and I think a lack of government and a lack of good government really does it puts people off just living their life here.
And
It,
what
it
about
probably it probably shouldn't be ignored that there's definitely that there's definitely parties here that they don't care that young people aren't engaged or are leaving because it's maybe good for their electoral success that like they're not getting involved in voting.
what are your thoughts, Matthew?
Yeah, to go along with Joe there, yes, young people are less politically involved. I also say they're more politically skeptical of the situation. Even myself, to be honest, I would say I'm politically active in my mind, but I would never talk about it out loud to people most of the time. And mostly because myself, I am skeptical of most politicians I meet. I meet a good few of them back home in Bangor. And even when I talk to one or two of them, Stephen Fry, for instance, I've talked to him once or twice, I always sort of in the back of my mind says, oh yeah, sure, really? Why? Yeah, sure. It's just really. But that's really how I think generation sees it. Most of them would be politically new to the whole situation. They would want to take part in it, but it's just seeing Storm itself. It just drains the enthusiasm and the want to be involved every single time. You see, like, the BBC says they're just about to get back together, and even everyone just thinks the same thing. Just about means they want another 5 years holiday, basically.
And with all the Good Friday Agreement things in the media, how important is the Good Friday Agreement today? How relevant is it? Because it's got its flaws, but do you think it still should be, acknowledged or, looked at by younger people?
I think it's got obviously an important role in our history. So it should always be held up in the esteem of what it's done to move the needle towards necessary and progressive change. But I don't think it should be free from criticism at the same time. That's not to say I would have wanted to do without, or as I said, I would have voted for it if I'd been able to vote then. So I think it still has an important role, but that's with the recognition that it can be changed. Like everything, things change, and you can't just go by how things were before. So I think it needs an updating.
With the anniversary, what bit do you think people should be focusing on the most?
Well, I would actually say, what I said earlier on about the other votes not mattering as much, and that would come in, your cross-community votes, because there's a large part of society that doesn't vote unionist or nationalist or green and orange politics, and we do live in a post-conflict society, so I think that almost the inclusion around it, so that's, the representation in Stormont, maybe getting rid of the designation system, even looking at the petition of concern, how we can either get rid of it or reform it, whatever parties can agree on. But I do think when it comes to reforming it, as Matt has said earlier on, it needs to come from Westminster. But there is not even just a lack of them taking an interest. I believe there's a lack of understanding. I think if you're not from Northern Ireland, it's easy enough for us to talk about the issues. But if you weren't born here, or raised here, or live here, you struggle to actually get your head around even how as a society we function.
I think what we need to do is really concentrate on yes, we should honour the past and everyone who suffered and who lost in the build up to the Good Friday Agreement. That has to be part of it. But it has to be with concentration on getting government back, but not just government, but good government. As Joe pointed out, as he reminded us, it's from Westminster. Now we might be coming into a time in less than 2 years where we might have a Labour government. Now don't get me wrong, they're not my flavour of Labour, sorry. But it's going to be better than the Tories. We might have a bit of a better ear listening to us. So we should probably concentrate on trying to get our voice heard there. And it was a Labour government that played their role in it in 1998. So how poetic, maybe with them coming back into power, and then if there's going to be change, why can't it happen with them?
And what about you, Matthew?
Yeah, I do agree. I do agree with everyone there. All as I am pretty much the layman here, just the average Joe that walks on the streets. But it is a landmark. I would say it should be treated as a landmark piece of legislation. It did do fantastic things for people. It stopped the violence. It got everyone to at least try and meet and talk to one another and not see each other only as an aggressor, but as someone who you can work with. Now, like all legislation, it needs to be changed. It needs to be adapted to the times. All politics is not stagnant. It cannot stay as it was 25, 30 odd years ago. It needs to evolve along with everyone else that's moving into it.
What sort of new legislation would you be looking out for?
New legislation would be anything along the lines of, say, there's as we said before, give it a mandatory coalition, but I would also say tie MLA's pay and pension to this as well. They have to turn up for the job. They don't get to have 4 years holiday paid by us just because they said, I don't like the guy that sits across from me. Because I don't remember the times I didn't turn up for work and got paid for not being there, basically.
Well, that's it for today. Thank you to all the guests who have participated in this podcast, and thank you, the listeners, for tuning in. Until next time, stay tuned and we'll talk later.